Hi, hey, and hello there. Obi-Han here, and welcome back to the Comic High Ground. Okay, so I'm about, let's say, 3 weeks late on X-Men, and that's kind of a good and a bad thing because what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna kind of give you all a quick run through of the third and the fourth episode, but the majority of this video is really gonna be focused on the fifth episode because it is the biggest episode of X-Men 97 so far, and it has the most significance. And there's a lot. I think that the episode 5 is pretty much what's gonna really build the rest of the season. So, first things first, episode 3. I think the last video I did, I talked about episodes 1 and 2, and basically there was a cliffhanger with the clone. Basically, episode 3 was obviously about Madeline Pryor. We find out that Sinister cloned Jean, as we all should have known anyway, and she kind of goes into her Goblin Queen mode because Sinister takes over her mind. And it's a really good episode. You get to see Jennifer Hill showcase her acting abilities, and it's just all around a really good episode. And then Sinister ends up infecting Scott and Madeline's child with the virus. I can't think of the name of it right now, but it's the virus that was a big thing in the earlier part of the X-Men series. So Bishop ends up having to take the son to the future, the son Nathan, of course, who also, by the way, is Cable, if you didn't know. So that's pretty much where that episode cuts. Now, oh, and I should mention that Madeline left. Madeline left and decided to let Jean stay there with the X-Men, and she took on the name Madeline, of course, and kind of went on about her adventure. And I'll bring Madeline back up in a little bit, but episode 4 kind of covers basically Storm, and it's a two-part. It's like a half and half episode. It's like, if you remember how sometimes shows have like these 15-minute sections where it's like two episodes in one, and that's what this was. So the first part of it was like a Jubilee episode. It really, in my opinion, was filler. So I'm not really going to talk about it too much. The second half of it was Storm with Forge. Forge was telling her that he could restore her powers. And again, this episode wasn't really just like all of episode 4 was kind of fillery, and I'm sure that especially the Storm part, is gonna have more to it. But ultimately, all that really happened is that Forge is putting Storm in his machine, trying to restore her powers, and they're kind of going through a trial and error thing. And then she finds out that Forge created the collars that inhibit mutant abilities, or at least he came up with the blueprints for it. He said he didn't physically create the collars, but it was based on an idea that he came up with. So she leaves, and then suddenly they're attacked by this creature, and that's where the episode goes off. So that episode, I think, will be resolved in episode 6. So now we get to episode 5. This is the episode. This is the real reason that I made this video, because I didn't want to go into episode 5 without at least telling you all a quick run through of what happened in 3 and 4. But episode 5 is the big episode. So we start the episode off with Rogue, Gambit, and Magneto going to Genosha, because obviously after the events of the first two episodes, Genosha is like its own continent. They've kind of let it into the UN, and so that's where all the mutants are going. And when they arrive, you see like this, almost like a paradise. The mutants are all having a good time. They're uh, pretty much have no worries at all, because the humans aren't there to give them troubles. There's this big city. They got shopping centers. All the kids are happy and everything. And Rogue and Gambit are just kind of like loving it. Oh, and there's also this statue of Magneto and Charles Xavier, kind of like when I think when they arrive there, you see like these huge statues. So it's kind of telling this to show you that those are the two pillars of the mutant community. But in any case, Gambit tagged along because obviously Rogue and Magneto have been kind of spending a lot of time with each other, and of course Gambit's not really a fan of that. And if you don't know, then Rogue and Magneto did have a thing in the comics, and it's interesting that they actually brought that up here in this series, and I'll kind of touch on that a little more later. But meanwhile, while they're kind of enjoying Genosha, uh, we cut back to the X Mansion where the X Men have are being interviewed by this. It's not a documentary; it's just kind of like a news segment, and she's basically this reporter is interviewing all the X Men, and she interviewed Beast and she interviewed Scott. That's really the main ones. Um, but then the one we want to kind of touch on is Scott's interview because basically, Scott's kind of in a bad place right now because he was married to Madeline or maybe Jean because we don't know which one was which when he got married. They don't know when they were swapped. So at this point, he doesn't know if he married Jean. He doesn't know if he married Madeline. He doesn't know if he married Jean and then had a. Well, one thing he does know is that he had a baby with Madeline, but again, he doesn't know which one of them he married. So he's kind of in this turmoil because now it's like he loves technically two different women, but they're also technically the same woman. So he's kind of in this weird space. And then his son, he just had to ship his son to the future because, of that virus. So he was adamantly against sending his son to the future with Bishop because he didn't want to abandon him like his father abandoned him. But in any case, they're asking him these questions, and he's kind of, he's answering the questions, but you can tell he's kind of bothered. And then they ask him about his son. He's like, well, he didn't have a son. So then they kind of call him out on it, and they're like, well, no, we looked at these records, and, you have a son. And at that point, they're like, well, why'd you lie? And at that point, Scott gets pissed, and he's like, look, basically, mutants have had to deal with this, that, and the other because of you humans, and you done all this, and we've been nice. And it's like, if we acted like y'all, or if we decided not to be so nice, y'all would be screwed. And he basically leaves. And there was more to what he said than that, but that's the gist of it. So if you know anything about Cyclops, you know that people love to say he's a Boy Scout, including Wolverine. But what you don't know is that, or what you may not know is that Scott went renegade. Scott was like, he was actually more renegade than Wolverine for a while. There's a section of his character history where he literally started becoming more aggressive. He started becoming more akin to first Wolverine, but then he surpassed Wolverine and he basically became the new Magneto. And a lot of people don't know that. And for me, I think it was a good peek at what might be happening with this Cyclops, and you really can't blame him when you look at everything he's dealt with. So, while this is going on, Jean is kind of having this conversation with Logan outside because, again, she's kind of dealing with the fact that she doesn't know when she was switched. She doesn't know which memories are hers and which ones are Madeline's. So she's kind of having some issues, and then Wolverine goes out there to kind of comfort her, and then Jean kisses Wolverine. So Wolverine kind of bags back and like, nah, this ain't right. You need to go talk to Scott. Now, keep that in mind because when we get back to Scott, he's talking to Jean and, she's kind of comforting him about the baby being gone and everything. And I think they kiss or something. And then all of a sudden you see another Jean pop up and I can't remember what she said, but she's pissed at the sight. Only to find out that this was actually Madeline that Scott was talking to in the astral plane, and Jean kind of burst in on them. So basically, Scott has been having a mental affair of sorts with Madeline for, I think he said, a month. And so, it's interesting because if you know anything about the comics, this happened with Emma Frost way back when he was having this thing with Emma Frost, and then Jean kind of intruded on it. It was a whole thing, but again, if you know the comics, then you know that that's what this is kind of referencing. So Jean is pissed and she storms out, but again, you kind of think about it and it's like, well, Jean, you just you just kissed Wolverine. Can you really say anything? Because at least Scott's was kind of mental, and then also it was with Jean, just not that Jean. But anyway, cut back to Genosha because I wanted to make sure I got all of the X-Mansion stuff out of the way. Um, Gambit and Rogue and Magneto find that Madeline has actually come to Genosha, and she's like a representative. She's on some board with Emma Frost, um, Moira McTaggart, and Sebastian Shaw, I think that's his name. And then the blonde political lady from the first episode, I can't think of her name. And so they want Magneto to serve as pretty much for lack of a better phrase, pretty much the president of Genosha. And basically Magneto's like, look, I'll do it, but Rogue has got to be my queen or whatever. So, which is a problem again because, Rogue's like, yo, what? How you just gonna do this? Was this your scheme the whole time? And he's like, I mean, they need to see an X-Men here with me to really kind of ease their nerves. So Rogue ends up pretty much agreeing to do it, and she then goes and tells Gambit basically her backstory with Magneto and how she met him before she became a member of the team, and their romance and the fact that Magneto can touch her and things of that nature. And then Gambit's like, you know what, forget it. So he goes to this ball with everybody else, and while they're all at this ball, because Madeline's there, Gambit's there, Rogue and Magneto had this dance sequence or whatever. And before I continue, I should mention Nightcrawler is in this episode, and he doesn't play a big role. He's just there, it's like, yo, it's Nightcrawler. So, they're all at this ball and everything, and then Madeline walks outside, and she kind of all of a sudden, well, I should say this first. She had a nosebleed, and after she had this nosebleed, then she walked outside. So she walks outside, and then she's still kind of struggling because she's like seeing these images, and then all of a sudden you hear Cable's voice. You hear Cable saying, "Stop the music! Stop the music!" And she looks up, and Cable's kind of running up through a crowd, and you see some lights and stuff. And he gets to Madeline. He's like, "You have to stop the music." And then I think his little computer says something. He says he's too late, and he's getting ready to phase out to go back to the future. And Madeline realizes that that's Nathan. She's like, "You're my son," and he's like, "Mother," and then he kind of teleports back to the future. Immediately after this, they are all attacked, and it's a really, really huge attack too because it just kind of levels the room that they're in. And Rogue is kind of getting up, she's woozy, and then Magneto's woozy, and they're all looking up and seeing people mutants getting blasted. And you look up in the sky, and there's this huge, huge Sentinel. Um, and it looks like the Tri-Sentinel because it has 3 heads, but I think it has another name. But the Sentinel pretty much is just like blasting and taking all the mutants down. And so Magneto, of course, gets pissed, and he takes it on. And all the other mutants that have tried to take it on pretty much have been taken down. Now, Rogue and Gambit work to try to save people. Eventually, Magneto is kind of brought down by the Sentinel, and Rogue, in an effort to try to save him, she's kind of flying towards him because Magneto's blocking this huge blast that is being shot at him, and he pins Rogue and Gambit to a wall to keep them from getting hit by the blast. So Magneto gets hit by this blast, and that's that. Like, we're led to believe that Magneto's taken out. And then Rogue gets really pissed, and then she just shoots towards the Sentinel, and the Sentinel's getting ready to blast her. And then Gambit hops on this motorcycle, charges it up, and then hits Rogue with it so she won't get hit by the blast. He then goes to take on the Sentinel and kind of leaps up at it, only to get stabbed in the side by the Sentinel. And he then, Gambit's powers work with his touch as well. So he basically touches the Sentinel, the wire that's in him, and charges it up. And he's like, "My name is Gambit. Remember it." And then pretty much takes out the Sentinel. Now, all this happened, and then Rogue gets up, and she goes to check on Gambit, and Gambit's gone. He didn't make it out of that attack. So that's where the episode cuts, and we're basically, the X-Men back at the X-Mansion have or saw the news covering it. So now the question is, what do they do? Because they've got a huge situation. And then on the writers, I had to say, wow, that was pretty gutsy to do that. That's Magneto and Gambit. Those are two big time characters in this show. So I wonder how they're gonna handle it. Of course, with Cable being implemented into this means time travel, which means it's always possible for them to undo that. But even with that, that was a pretty gutsy move, and I applaud them for being willing to write that. Um, as far as what they're going to do next, who knows? The next episode is going to be about Storm, continuing Storm's story with getting her powers back. So I'm assuming whenever her powers come back, she's going to reconvene with the other X-Men, and then they're going to figure out what to do because, again, Scott is more renegade now. Scott is probably, he's probably like about ready to just throw hands, period. So we'll see what's gonna happen with that. But aside from that, yeah, that was episode 5, and it was a big one. Um, I'm really looking forward to see how they continue this story. So we'll see in the next couple of weeks. But hit that like button if you like this video. Drop a comment to let me know what you thought about episode 5, because I know a lot of people are talking about it. Hit that subscribe button, please, and remember, we have the high ground. Catch you later.